Pius Nyamora, a journalist, welcome to the JSO interview.
Thank you, John.
I describe you as a journalist because, fast forwarding in your life from 1977 to 1988, you worked for The Nation newspaper. In 1988, you launched Society, a political news magazine to fight for democracy in Kenya. In 1994, political threats forced you and your family to flee to the United States, which gave you political asylum. And with a few visits back to your motherland, so to speak, you have lived in the US ever since. We're referring to a dark chapter in our history. Just how dark?
It was extremely dark because in 1988, when I left The Nation after 11 years with them, my idea was to start a newspaper to allow Kenyans the freedom to express themselves. Because by that time, the opposition was not allowed to speak. And that had gone on for quite some time, and it had gotten worse since 1982 after the attempted coup in Kenya. So my idea was to have people who did not have any other forum to express their opinions about the way things were going in Kenya through Society. And my first story was with an interview with Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, which was really a profile of Oginga Odinga. Later, people started coming up with stories which we never expected. For instance, people were being tortured at the Nyayo chambers, and we had people who had been tortured there, like Mr. Kamangara coming and giving us the story. Mr. Miano, also who had been tortured there, they came to give us the story. Then we started getting exclusives, so for instance, corruption in government. And we also published those stories. By the way, and we ended up being the first newspaper, Kenyan newspaper, to publish the memorandum of association of the first opposition party to be launched. By then, it had not been registered by the government, so it was supposed to be called a pressure group. But because I knew the situation in Kenya, I went ahead and termed it an opposition party had been formed, and we published the whole memorandum of association, the only paper in Kenya to do that. We had not been invited to the press conference. A foreign correspondent gave us a copy, and I published it.
Right, so let's go back. The worst that could have happened to you at some point, if memory serves, because I was very much an adult in those days, was not your printing press either closed down or burnt down. What were the risks? What was the fallout? Here you are being a beacon of freedom of expression. What were the risks in those days?
There were actually many dangers. For instance, we were being followed by special branch officers. My home at Mountain View was monitored almost 7 days a week. We'll find the 2 officers at the gate. Then at one point, we were rounded up. I was supposed to go to Zambia to address journalists on the freedom of the press. The government took up my passport on that day. They arrested me. I did not know they were going to arrest my wife. They did it. And then they arrested 3 other senior officers of Society, put us in different police stations in Nairobi. And our lawyers kept going around, particularly Paul Mwite, but he was being told I wasn't at River where I was. I saw him coming in through the window, and the policeman later told me, oh, Mwite was here, but we told him you were not in. Then later they took us to Mombasa, also kept us in different police stations from a Thursday, I think.
But do they treat you with civility? I mean, quite apart from the...
The problem was, when they took us to Shimo La Tewa to lock us in there, the most embarrassing thing was that I was stripped in front of my junior staff. Together, naked, before we were taken in 2 cells.
And your wife was in the same cell? Was she also forced to be stripped naked?
My wife was stripped also. but at the women's side
Right.
of the cell.
So here you are suffering the humiliation of being stripped naked amongst people who perhaps you considered your juniors or...
Yes, that
Right.
was worse actually than eating ugali, which felt as if it had been mixed with sand.
Right.
And we had to endure eating that for about 10 days until the international community, the local organizations like release political prisoners.
Right.
Smith Armstrong, the American ambassador, the German ambassador, they made noise and we were released, but 10 days later.
Right. So what was the trigger, in the context of a very short conversation, what was the trigger to leave? When did you feel it's time to leave?
You see, my idea was to enable Kenyans to get the opposition parties. In 1992, we were able to get that. Although the opposition did not win the election, I knew now Kenyans could speak. And in addition, a firebomb was placed in our office on the exit side. And we were lucky to have a back door which the bombers did not know existed. It had a burglar proof, but we were able to find the key and get out. But the front...
So the idea was to burn you alive in your office?
Yes, I was there with my wife and one member of staff at 8 p.m. at night.
Right, and was it we've got stories now of whistleblowers, talking about the U.S. and going to whichever country, Ecuador and Julian Assange, so many years back. How difficult was it for you to get out of the country? Now,
I didn't have a passport. Now, the U.S. Embassy actually helped me to get out because Smith Armstrong demanded that I get my passport back from the government because I was allegedly going for training organized by the USIS, United States Information Service. So when I got the passport, I got the invitation for the course, a 2-week course. I went there and we left our house in Runda without anyone. The office, we just left it the way it was. Staff was still there because we did not want to be known to be actually escaping.
That is you and your wife?
My wife and I.
And your children as well?
The children actually had left. We had sent our second kid there earlier.
Right.
Because when there was a bomb and when we were arrested,
right.
He was left alone in the house at night.
Right.
He was not told we had been arrested.
Right, so we have some more sort of mental torture.
Yes.
Okay, so there you are. You do manage, with the connivance of the US government, to get out of this.
Yes.
And to get to the US.
Yes.
So, my feeling is that a lot of people who think about the US and living in the US, it's a bit like Dick Whittington and the streets of London paved with gold. When you got to the US, did you find that in essence you had arrived?
It was actually...
The beckoning shores, the Statue of Liberty, send them tempest-tossed to me. Did you feel that you had arrived?
It was not. It is not what Kenyans imagine. Actually, when we went there in Michigan, where our kids lived, that they were going to school, we had to share a room with them. Within a month, they were told to leave that house. So we went to a place you could call a slum, a place called Tecumseh. It was a slum kind of thing, where I couldn't live there. Probably I would prefer living in Mathare Valley than living in that place, but we had to. Because even if I had cash, which I did not have, the Americans want you to have a credit history. We tried to get a better house because we knew we could pay $400. We couldn't, so we had to live there. Now, looking for a job was difficult. I went there like a Kenyan. I can't drop that low. I want to be a journalist. I couldn't even get copy making, like a copy maker, photocopying job. I couldn't. First of all, I had an accent. According to Americans, when you have an accent, most of them think you are not intelligent enough. So after about 1 year, I realized I had to do anything. So I got into a photo lab, processing pictures. I had to be taught how to process pictures. As a journalist, I knew to size them. I knew how to size them. This young American, at least, was sympathetic, having heard about my story. He gave me that job. $6.75, and that's nothing. Then we were running also, selling the gifts we took from here for our friends. We had to open a kiosk in a mall in order to survive. And every evening I'm asking my wife, how much did we get? Because the kids have to eat. We didn't have any other source of income. My son had to work in the cafeteria, in the college cafeteria. Our other son had to do like painting also in the cafeteria to earn some little money in order to survive. So it was really, really difficult.